administration's criminal investigation into Fed Reserve Chair Jay Powell initially rattled Wall Street Monday, but the Dow and S&amp 500 managed to close at record highs. Now, Alan Greenspan, Ben Bernanke, Janet Yellen, and other former Fed officials defended the Fed's independence, calling the probe an unprecedented political attack. While the investigation emerged after Powell stated that the Fed received Justice Department subpoenas related to his testimony on a building renovation project. Powell suggested the probe was baseless and meant to pressure the Fed to cut interest rates. Well, joining me today is Chris Whalen, chairman of Whalen Global Advisors. Chris, good morning. Thank you so much for joining me. So there have been a lot of commentary as well as responses regarding what happened in terms of the probe. But do you think confidence in the U.S. is being undermined? And do you think Powell stays on the Fed board through 2028?
I think that the way the Trump administration has handled this whole relationship with the Fed has been unfortunate. You know, you want Powell to retire. You want to be able to appoint your man as chairman and also perhaps get some other open seats so you can put your people into place and change policy. And instead, the Trump White House has personalized this. I think there is an increasing chance that Kevin Hassett is not going to be nominated as chairman, even though he was clearly the favorite. And then, as you said, I think there's a very high chance now that Governor Powell is going to remain on the board through 2028. He doesn't have to retire when his term as chairman is up. And I think, you know, Remy, this is why we have 14-year terms for Fed governors in order to extend beyond the 4-year political cycle.
Yeah, and 2026 is just getting underway, but home prices and mortgage rates do put home ownership out of reach for many Americans. And Trump is proposing banning institutional investors from buying single-family homes and having the Fed government buy $200 billion in mortgage bonds to push rates lower. So with housing supply shortages as well as market forces beyond Washington's control, how much could these policies actually lower the cost of buying a home? And in reality, how do you think things will shake out here?
I don't think any of these proposals are actually going to happen. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac don't have $200 billion laying around that they can use to fund these purchases, so they would have to borrow the money. You know, institutional investors in 1 to 4 family homes is tiny. It's low single digits. Really, supply is the issue, Remy, as you said. And you know, there are a variety of things that we have been seeing that are increasing supply. In certain parts of the country, you have oversupply, particularly in the South and Southeast and the Southwest. But, you know, in the northern states, you still have a lack of home building, and it's mostly because of local zoning requirements. So I think that most of this is just rhetoric. It's about the midterm election. President Trump is worried about being impeached if the Democrats take the House. And so I think you're going to hear more and more aspirational statements coming from the White House. Will they become policy? I don't think so.
Well, Chris, while I have you here, I do want to ask you about credit card rates as well, because we know that Americans pay attention to those rates. And Trump proposed a one-year cap on credit card interest rates aimed at lowering borrowing costs for consumers. But with current rates averaging around 20% and revolving credit keeping many in debt for years, how do you see this proposal actually helping consumer, or do you even see it passing at all?
Well, Congress would have to pass legislation to cap credit card rates for national banks. They might be able to also extend it to banks that were insured by the FDIC. In state institutions, it's a matter of state law. So, you know, is Congress going to look at this? Yes. Will there be hearings? Yes. I don't know that you'll see a law passed, though, Remy. You know, credit cards are really collective credit. So you have the good borrowers subsidizing the bad. If you look at somebody like Synchrony, for example, they wrote off almost 6% of their portfolio on an annualized basis in the fourth quarter. So that tells you what kind of a business it is. And it really is ultimately about, do you want people to have access to credit and at what price? I think this discussion will be helpful because it will push rates down. Credit card companies may respond to the rhetoric But ultimately, it's a dollars and cents business.
Yeah, and you just touched on consumer lenders, but earnings season has kicked off. We heard from JP Morgan, and we are expecting a slew of big bank earnings. So, what are you paying attention to this earnings season?
Well, I think the big issue with Morgan particularly was credit. Their credit expenses are flat. They are buying the portfolio for Apple from Goldman Sachs, so they had to do a reserve build for that, a couple $1 billion. But overall, the industry is still seeing credit expenses relatively benign. We haven't seen an uptick in default activity, Remy. And I think that's another reason why, politically speaking, this whole issue of what do consumers pay for credit is not going to go away. Trump is very astute politically, but I don't know that he understands that Congress actually has to get involved here. So you're going to see a lot of proposals coming from the White House over the next few weeks and months, and all of it is focused on the midterm elections.
Well, Chris, we will have to leave it there for today, but thank you so much for joining me. And as always, thank you so much for sharing all of your insights.
Oh, my pleasure, Remy.